we go. Welcome to the Bucky Weekend Call, September 17, 18, whichever continent you're on. And here we go tonight with our further Bucky consideration. So Anne, how are you feeling tonight and what do you expect out of the call?
Yes, I'm feeling great. Thank you very much for asking. And to take away, actually, it's more like to continue from last week here, because there are quite a few things that were brought up that I really liked. What Susan said about the assembly line not being linear, and Joe was talking about Bucky laying out how to design. And I think, Manu, your takeaway was energy is irreducible and know-how can only increase. So I want to see how far we can take it from here. Let me see. Yes, so that's my expectation for today. And Joe, how do you feel, and what do you expect to take away today?
I feel pretty good. And today I'm looking just to build off of last week, and yeah, I'm trying to. I believe we were right around concept 8. So design science. So I'm looking to see Bucky's thoughts, or look into what Bucky's thinking was. Again, I'm always impressed by how he was able to predict the future so in some ways, so clearly, or see the future so clearly. And so I think that's what I'm looking to see what he has to say about design science. And Manu, my friend, my good friend, how you doing? What are you taking? What would you like to take away from today?
Well, I'm so happy to have been here. I woke up and I went back to sleep. So, anyway, I feel good. It's nice to have the 4 of us. It makes a set that can be really very interesting. What I look forward is for us to continue and really to understand these principles and use them, as always I say, to apply practically in life and to have as much positive influence around me and as far as possible. So that my very practical expectation of this is to really apply them practically to solving issues and problems of our environment in a way that is responsible. Steve, how do you feel? What do you take away? What do you expect?
Well, I'm feeling pretty good. I had a band job tonight. My bass player had his birthday, and so he had a big party in his house, and we played from 5 to 7, and he had lights there, so it started getting dark, and it was cool. And I haven't, man, my fingers, I don't know, man. I used to be very agile, but playing music is always exhilarating for me. I get to sing and I get to play, and it takes me to the center of my soul. And I think that's what these Bucky calls do too, because I'm not just talking about this idea or that idea or agreeing with this idea or that idea. It's really about looking deeply. It's like looking at what has not been seen. How is it that Bucky sees all this stuff? And to hear how everybody shares their perspective and what's being revealed to them as we look at the energy that's in a process. Einstein said everything is energy. And I don't think anybody believes that. I remember saying everything is energy, but if I really get down to everything is energy, if I'm looking at this jar, it's not a jar, it's energy. And how did it get to be here? And why is it acting the way it's acting? And what is that? What's that tea bag in there? And how's that? I don't know. It's just like, and so this idea of ontology, what is the very existence of that thing? And the idea of the topology of it, which is really interesting to me. Topography is, okay, there's a mountain here and a mountain there. Topology is, what is a mountain? And if I go to Google and I look up what is a mountain, or if I say, what's the difference between a mountain and a hill? That's amazing, the conversation they get in there. See, the human brain conceptualizes things. I think everybody thinks they know what a mountain is. But I'm not so sure. And I love these calls because we get to take a look at ideas that are right in front of us every day. Industrialization, children, tools. And we get to see what the energy is about that and how Bucky put all that together. So I'm very excited about proceeding with tonight. And I'm delighted everybody's here. And I'm so glad we had a discussion about the emails that are going out. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the time to send an individual email to everybody and make sure that they either accept or deny that invitation so that I know they're getting it. Because I'll bet you half of the people out there don't even know we're having these meetings because my emails are going and they don't know who Stevie T is and they let it go. So we'll see if I can improve that. I'm going to make a note here, send individual emails, and we'll go from there. All right, we're ready to begin tonight. And here we go. We're going to leave off where we left off last week. I was told by Manu that we left off with
Page, I think 31.
right here, page 31. And we left off with the concept of man on earth is to be spoken about as a frequency modulated environment occupancies. Wow. And I think you guys finished that paragraph, right? So
yes, I believe we did.
All right, good. So we're going to pick it up then right from here. And that's where we're going to go from. And Joe,
Sure.
I'm happy to trade off reading with you. So
All right, let's do it. We'll go back and forth.
all right.
Well,
I'll read the first one because it's small.
Okay. Well, all right. Well, thank you for that.
No, we'll switch in here too. We'll cut this up. So when you're reading this,
Oh,
when you hit a mental pause, just pause. Okay. All right. While this frequency modulated use of service industry products by humanity may seem extreme in terms of yesterday's experience, the trends clearly indicate this mode of life will soon dominate world-around living patterns and will become the major mode of life within the next 25 years. Must be referring to something that was set up here. Do we want to relook at that paragraph up there to put a little context
I
on
think
it?
it was the
You say
airline.
the concept of man on earth is to be spoken about as frequency modulated environment occupancies.
Yeah. Human beings on Earth is to be spoken about as frequency modulated environment occupancies. Okay, good. I can tell that last week had some good stuff to it. All right. So while this frequency modulated use of service industry products by humanity may seem extreme in terms of yesterday's experience, the trends clearly indicate this mode of life will soon dominate world around living patterns and will become the major mode of life within the next 25 years. I was just listening to a guy who does podcasts on music, and he's talking about Spotify and how, like in the 60s and 70s, a person could go out and buy a record. The record had pictures on it of the band. It told you who produced the record, who the players were. It had some words there, sometimes poems, sometimes some facts. And there was something you could actually experience. And now people just download music on their iPad. They don't even know who produces or what. There's no story to it. And it's like there's so much more energy, a frequency modulated energy in a record album than there is in a file, an MP4 or an MP3 on Spotify. Do you get different energy when you hold an album in your hands? Anyway, any other thoughts or comments or questions about that? Will become a major mode of life in the next 25 years. And of course, we're already past that. This book was written in 65, 69. So that would have been 85, 89, somewhere around there. Okay, good. Want to read, Joe?
Sure. I was just looking up some of the
Well, what were you
terms
looking
of our. I know just some of the old terms that with FM and AM. But we can come back to that a little bit later.
All right. Cool.
Lockheed Aircraft Company has a 10,000 passenger aeroplane on the drawing boards. These new large ships, starting with the 700 passenger, can land in unprepared fields. Length of the 10,000 passenger ships, fuelless
Fuselage.
fuselage, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you, is in the magnitude of the Empire State Building's height or the Queen Mary's length. This means that within the next decade or 15 years, if man maintains evolutionary schedule, he will be able to fly a whole fleet of automated factory produced skyscrapers into place and upend for immediate occupancy. This is analogous to a fleet of ocean liners coming into port and taking on the city-sized passenger population on the same day. Instant city, static urban planning will be as obsolete and inappropriate in 15 years as the attempt to build brick ships upon a stormy sea. With the computer storing and retrieving all the latest data on elevator shafting. Can you make that font a little bigger?
Yeah. How's that?
Yeah, that's a
Oh my
lot.
gosh, that's the end of the, that's
Is that the end of,
the
yeah, it's in the end of the concept. Interesting.
Oh, no, there's there's something up here. Okay.
Electrical harnesses, plumbing and manifolds, and doing the drawings, architecture and planning as now taught will be obsolete.
He was sure futuristic there, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean,
mean-
you know,
We're still having trouble trying to use modular housing.
right.
You know, we invented modular housing. I can remember in the 70s, I was in real estate in 77, and modular housing, they were trying to make that a big deal. Modular homes are actually more sturdy than stick built. If there's a mudslide, the house will just slide right down. It doesn't fall apart. If there's an earthquake, the ground cracks underneath it, the house stays there because it's just well built if it's modular, just like he was talking about. But that has never come in to accepted modality. And one of the reasons why is bank financing. It's hard to get bank financing on anything that's not stick built.
And why is that?
But one thing is people can pick it up and move it.
Mhm.
And if you pick it up and move it, then it may not be there. And the bank doesn't want a loan on something. Like they do like prefabbed houses, modular, we have mobile homes. And FHA finally said, okay, if you would take that home and attach it permanently to the ground, we'll give you a loan on it. But
Mhm.
you have to attach it permanently on the ground. And if you don't attach it permanently on the ground, we won't give you a loan. So
Mhm.
I gotta be honest, I understand the bank's position on this.
yeah, it's
I mean,
exactly.
gotta
Because,
be honest.
because
The
they
asset
can't
could
fund
disappear
you.
tomorrow. I mean,
Yeah.
what the hell?
Can you imagine? I put in $100 million loan for an Empire State Building.
That all of
And
a
the guy-
sudden it's in
and the guy
Chicago the
flies
next
it
day.
away. Yeah, he moves it to Chicago the next day. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, yeah, I'm, you know, I understand that there are some problems with our financial system, but this is not one of them.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions?
No. I do think that it's interesting how design has evolved, design science in general, and
Yeah.
architecture. And specifically, I think Bucky had a lot of radical and revolutionary ideas in that particular area.
You know, yeah.
Just with the geodesic dome. I mean,
Yeah.
thinking about
Yeah.
things like that.
But see, it's non-conforming. It doesn't conform. A bank does not want to give a loan on a unique property. They want to give a loan on a property that's the same as some other property. And they know that if it goes in the market, it'll sell in 30 days because everybody wants it because it's a standard thing. There have been some really unique homes built as a real estate agent. There were some great dome homes built. There were some great pentagonal homes built. These were all prefabs. Banks would not loan on those properties because they were non-conforming. Back in 77, 78, 79, I was pushing for multi-use loans where you could build a building and put commercial on the bottom, put office space in the middle, and then put residential at the top. And you could not get a loan for that stuff. It's just
Wow.
coming into vogue.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, this one of the unique things, and I'd led discussions on this in the past, is that non-conforming are just ideas and funding ideas themselves. When you're talking about finance, that's the way bank financing works. But this is the reason you have venture capital, so that they can fund ideas and take risks on ideas, not necessarily just something that's already been established.
Yeah.
And that
So you have-
drives innovation. Now we can complain about, the capitalist system. I understand that, but venture capital takes risks that banks don't, that lead to new industries.
Yeah.
But
And
Joe, venture capitalists, they use their own resources to take risk.
Yeah.
That's right.
The problem with banking is that since the taking away of a Glass-Steagall
Yes.
Act, what happened is that my resource, I have nothing to do with the venture. The bank would take my resource, my asset, to speculate on something on which I'm not involved.
Right.
So the risk, there is the intermediaries. The bank was supposed to just to be the oiler of transactions around.
Mm-hmm. And they fill that role by not financing certain things. Meaning,
Yeah, but it's all murky.
it is. Oh, I'm not saying it's. I'm not saying it's clean. I'm just saying I some of the risk taking that is necessary, is based off of as you said, kind of private. It is private money, and there's a lot of problems with venture capital. Don't get me wrong. But I just wanted to point that out, is that, banks not giving traditional loans is an example of how things don't change, and that you need some outside force to finance projects that actually create the change, whether it's change you want. And this has been mimicked by China. This has been mimicked by they have venture capital groups as well that have tried to replicate what the American firms have done. But 6 of the top 10 wealthiest companies in the world are all venture capital based. And those companies would have never come to fruition with just traditional bank financing. Tesla would have never been a company with traditional bank financing, nor would have Amazon or Google.
Yeah.
Let me come. Yeah, and just go on.
Yeah, I'm just wondering because in I think Netherlands, in the Netherlands, they started having these floating homes because of the flooding and all that from the sea, right? Whenever the tide goes up. So they've got these floating homes that will go up and down according to the level of the water. So, but on its own, it literally can be towed away, right? Because I really like the idea of it, and bringing up, I'm like, wow, they just won't give, financing for this idea, right? Where you can literally move. But I'm wondering how they do that for that. And also you have those, the people who are now even making homes on board their little yachts, because my sister was looking into buying one of these boats. And because you anchor, it's way cheaper than buying a home in Singapore, because, she used to live in Singapore. So it's very expensive to buy homes there. So they were looking at buying those boats. Then you also have the barges in the UK. So I'm just very interested how they keep track of all these things. Should they actually fund the building of these homes?
What I wanted to say here is to anchor a little bit back to the text here, and what he's talking about is for that I put in the frequency modulation that you should put with the ability to divide, that is to digitize finer and finer, and then to retrieve into modulating. I don't know if I'm expressing myself quite right here. I'm saying you have information. You have the ability to divide information, to divide that, to digitize that information with the help of computers, and to retrieve it fast. So if you are making stuff, I mean, we're talking about lending and all these things in the world, you know, we are capable, the capability of tracking, the capability of controlling, the capability of doing many things in a finer grain is enhanced tremendously. Because when you talk about frequency modulation technique or process of encoding information on a particular signal, analog or digital, by varying the carrier wave frequency in accordance with the frequency of the modulated signal. How do you put that with the how will I say it? In the no, let me just, I'm little, maybe I'm still foggy here. But still,
Well, let me ask you this. So, you know, how I'm trying to put FM and AM and the circles of relevancy in together. Does that work as far as frequency modulation?
No, I'm just saying, I was just coming here. The concept of man on earth is to be spoken about as frequency modulated environment occupancies.
Okay.
Yeah, he's quoting Bucky there. If we go back to the actual thing, I also want to say that Warren Buffett was big on modular home financing. When modular home financing started to die, Warren Buffett bought it. And there's a company that does modular home financing and mobile home financing. I forget what it's called, Green something. And he thought it was the next thing since sliced bread because everybody was going to be going for modular and mobile homes, but they didn't do it. But still, Warren Buffett owns that. So that's kind of cool. Okay, so if we go to what, this is the point here about frequency modulated use of service in these industry products. I understand frequency modulation. I understood amplitude modulation. I don't know how they work together because frequency modulation, you send out a radio frequency and it's how many times that sine wave occurs in a second. And the different times as faster, closer those sine waves are together or the further apart, that's how it changes the sound. Amplitude modulation is the frequency goes out and it goes up and down and expands horizontally or vertically rather. And they measure the sound by how narrow the band gets and how wide the band gets. We ought to be able to see a something on frequency modulation versus amplitude modulation.
Would then the amplitude then talking about size changing in sizes?
See, here's amplitude modulation. It's how fat the signal gets. AM radio. That's what AM radio does. And frequency modulation is FM radio. And it's how close the sine waves are together. And what they do is they actually chop off the top. And that's how they get stereos. They get half of this band is the left channel and the other half is the right channel. They actually send out two carriers on top of each other, and they actually affect the sending of these frequency modulations. So this is the difference between amplitude modulation and frequency modulation. Here's the standard signal that you see. And so this one just goes upper and higher and lower is amplitude, and closer together is frequency modulation. The main difference between both modulations is that in frequency modulation, the carrier wave frequency is modified as per the transmit data. In contrast, in amplitude modulation, the carrier wave is modified according to the data.
Okay, let me try this out and see. Because one of the guys who joined our company, he used to work with Air Asia, one of the biggest low cost carrier in our region, right? So he was tasked to handle the ground handling for the goods and stuff. The cargo that arrives. Yeah. So the issue with a warehouse is that let's say you have different airlines booking different size spaces, but then it's not fully utilized the entire time. So what happened was when he was at this club one night at this place called Zouk in Malaysia, in KL, and he looked at the disco lights. So he looked at the lights, the colored lights, and he decided to use those lights in the warehouse. So all now he needs to do is they put all the lights up, and the colored lights will demarcate the area for the cargo that arrives. So let's say if you have British Airways, then they take this amount of cargo space, but after they leave and they don't need the space, it changes to space for another cargo. So with that alone, I think he saved the company, this Air Asia, a heck of a lot of money. And in a space of 2 years, they double or triple the revenue, because it was just shifting the lights rather than making people book specific space sizes. So would that mean that it's both frequency, because the frequency of use is high, and also the amplitude, meaning the size, I don't know, which can change, as and when people need it. Does that work? Not sure, just thinking. Yeah.
I understood your example and as something that has to do with frequency modulation application, and I would like to come back to what Steve showed there. Frequency modulation has to do with counting.
Yeah.
So if you count, therefore it is computers. You need computers who help you a great deal. So the faster you can count and store and retrieve for use, the better you are at frequency modulating. Am I wrong, Steve?
Yeah. Because
no, I think you're right.
I'm just taking from, because it's a term that we tend to use, but every time that you come back to the root of it, what it is, basically, sometimes people are confused. And it comes back to what Steve was saying there, amplitude modulation and frequency modulation. Computers and computing ability is intrinsically linked to progress in frequency modulating. The more we have that capability, the better it is. The better we are at using that technique.
Okay, because I'm looking back at what Bucky said about the the hotel room, because we all sleep only 8 hours, so that one room can actually be used 3 times if people just check in and check out every 8 hours, right? Yeah. So that's the frequency of use. So the cargo space, and there's the frequency of use. The one thing that a hotel room you can't do is, change the size of the space that you want, right? Because literally amplitude is loud and soft. That means it's bigger sound, smaller sound, right? So I'm just wondering if that use of space that he did would be what Bucky would mean FM, and maybe what Steve mentioned on the AM side. So I thought it was such a brilliant idea. I was like, wow,
But Susan, and take 24 hours, right? Before using amplitude modulation, what would be the use of that space before. Maybe one cargo coming
Yeah.
and going, and everybody goes home. So you couldn't use better. When you say using better of the cargo space is exploiting those dead times where it stands there idle and nothing is done. And you cannot do that if you don't understand, you haven't counted what the dead time is. And you cannot, if you haven't seen how you can use that dead time to increase the output of usage of the cargo space, isn't it? What I mean is that you need to understand what it is, your space, what is it being used for, and how much possible can it be used? How many other ways can it be used? And tailor the use according to that to increase your output.
I think, and that what you and Manu are saying, what I see is that talking about frequency modulation and amplitude modulation is a metaphor for energy. And any way that I can take that and apply it in a situation in order to improve output or improve usage or improve profitability or improve happiness, any way I can use that metaphor, I don't think there's any one way to do it. I think it's the idea, just like you said, you can't change the size of a hotel room, but you can change how many times you can fill it in a day, right? And if you have a rule that says, well, we only allow 24-hour occupancy, then you've limited the number of people you can put in that room.
Mhm.
Whereas, they have day rates now at hotels. Most hotels have a day rate. But they have to have the staff to prepare the room to get ready for the next thing. So it creates a thing.
Yes.
So, but I think that just us thinking ontologically about frequency modulation and amplitude modulation, just thinking about it is what Bucky was trying to get us to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Cool.
So the keywords in what Bucky was saying here is frequency modulation of occupancies.
Yeah. This concept of man on earth is to be spoken about as frequency modulated
Environmental occupancies. What is our space? How finite do we identify the uses of a space? And therefore we can, if we know that, we can use it more effectively.
And just like with your hotel room, that was the whole concept of timeshare, that people would buy these condominiums on the beach, but they wouldn't only be able to be there a month out of the year. And they thought, well, what can we do with the other months?
Yeah,
So
that's actually a great point.
people start, what, Joe?
That's a great point.
Yeah. So people started renting it, and that wasn't efficient. So then they just started selling timeshares and say, you have just bought 3 weeks or 2 weeks or 1 week at this hotel. And they just started, or at this, on this condo, and they would sell the other weeks to other people. And then people could trade their weeks. So, it didn't matter what week I bought because I could trade my week with you.
Mm.
But the guy who's developer makes a lot of money on that. If you guys remember, I showed my factored real estate model, and timeshare is one of those elements. Maybe I should find that for you. I will do
The
that.
developer makes a lot of money on that?
Oh yeah. Timeshare is big time.
I know timeshare. Yeah.
You have to have you have to have a sales staff that knows how to sell stuff to people, right? But here's my factored real estate model, and it's opening up now, and then I'll share it, and you'll see where timeshare is involved in that.
Yeah, without me knowing, because that's something that's always, I thought, was a last resort for some of these guys.
Well, it's just the way to maximize use. I mean, I've got a condo there. I've taken this 8-plex and I rented it out. But you know what? If I can sell one of those units to somebody, I can get more money. So I create condominium. Now I sold out that condominium. Now the guy can't stay there every day. So he can Airbnb it. That increases frequency.
Right.
And, or
Yep.
he could, or we could sell timeshare and I'd only buy 3 weeks occupancy in this building. So timeshare is like the highest level of use because we're selling every minute or every week of that property. Factoring real estate. Yeah. Yeah. Are
How
we,
successful is the time sharing companies? Yeah, because they have to make sure this can carry on for the next whatever number of years. Do they after some time close or something like that? I'm just wondering.
Say again, Anne, please.
yeah, I didn't understand your question or comment.
Just wondering how successful this, because when people come to us on these time sharing concepts, yeah, sometimes we're very worried to take it on because you're buying the future, right? And especially over in Asia, there's a tendency for services like that to close down, like say 5 years down the road, and then you don't have access to it, because it happened with you can buy a package for massages, right? And you buy 10 and you don't have time to go, and lo and behold, if you don't use them all up, or you renew and you buy some more, 5 years down the road they close, and I couldn't find the company again, that kind of thing. So I'm just wondering if timeshare that happens, and
Yeah,
what
timeshare that does happen. And
right.
it's a unique market. And people bought it when it came out in the 80s and 90s. People were buying it because of inflation. They were trying to protect themselves from paying some inflated hotel room rate. But the cost of upkeep, it tends to be prohibitive, and a lot of people end up losing money on their timeshare. So I'm not saying it's a wise investment. I'm just saying it's a way to increase frequency.
Yeah, it's a brilliant idea, actually. Yeah, was just wondering the success rate. Yeah. Yep. Thank you.
Are we ready to continue to read?
Yeah, let's do this.
Yep.
All right, my turn.
I can
Concept
go.
9. What's that?
Go ahead.
All right, I'll give you the big ones, Joe.
All right.
Concept 9, world service industries to swiftly replace ownership with rentals of new equipment maintained at constantly renewed higher standards of performance because more profitable and more satisfying to humanity. Service industries on world-round and year-round automatically accountable credit card basis. They're talking about in the future that very few people will own cars.
Yeah, that's funny you're
ahead.
saying that. Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, yeah, it's moving towards a rideshare model. And interestingly enough, even when this was written, I actually know the guy, not a good guy, but who pretty much had a patent on the 2-year lease for automobiles. And so essentially you're using you're replacing the idea of ownership in that particular instance.
Yeah.
And then it's constantly being renewed, and you're constantly driving something new. But I don't think that that's anything. I don't think that that's maybe you're driving something new, but I don't think that that's a good thing. Whereas ride sharing, I think, is a different model that actually could benefit humanity.
Yeah. Salt Lake City has a bunch of electric scooters that are just on the street corners.
Yeah, they're starting those too.
Yeah. And so you just get on an electric scooter, you put your card in, you drive it for a little while, and then you leave it there. And
but there is something here that is insidious.
Yes.
And that we don't just capture that is dangerous. And that thing is this one. You replace ownership, you have to replace it with commonwealth. If you don't replace ownership with commonwealth, there's going to be the danger of some elite capturing this and enslaving everybody.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
That is the constant danger. So you replace ownership, but the dual of it is that it has to be a commonwealth. In other words, we have to see it. And Bucky was talking about the spaceship Earth. We have to
The
see
Great
it as something,
Pirates.
yes, over which we have custody, right? We have to care for or to act in a way that is, how would I put it, accommodable by it during our time on this spaceship. So it can't be Joe's spaceship. It is our spaceship.
Yeah.
And it's very, very difficult. And that's where ideologies come to play. And it becomes something else.
Yeah.
Or the danger of something else.
This
Mm.
concept of commonwealth or the commons, most people don't understand that. In America, we did really good with our schools and our utilities. They were owned by the city, and everybody paid taxes to support having a good water system and sewer system. We in the US, we were really big on the post office. Everybody got their mail. It was a commonwealth. It was commonly, everybody contributed to it, and we got something. And that's falling apart. They've been trying to privatize the post office. And as soon as it's owned by somebody, then it's not in the common interest. So I think this is a good point, Manu. Anne, were you starting to say something?
No, I do agree with you. Yep.
Okay, so Joe, you want to read or what you looking at?
Sure.
Okay.
No, I'm looking for treasure. I was looking for Warren Buffett, and then and I'm also looking at Tragedy of the Commons.
The Berkshire Company, that was his first big investment with Berkshire, I do believe, was a mobile financing, and then he made Berkshire grow from there. Go ahead.
As world industrialization and transportation set up increases, all humanities is gradually trending towards being worldians, all to enjoy Earth. The static environment
Appurtenances.
appurtenance. I don't even know what that actually
This is a real estate word. Appurtenance is something that's attached to something.
Okay.
So, and appurtenance to the environment would be mountains and valleys and rivers. These are environment appurtenances.
Of their earlier life will become progressively disused and cumbersome. Therefore, the tend to development of rental services industries will be vastly accelerated. After half a century of owning and operating 55 successive automobiles, I am now switching to rental car or card. I imagine he means car.
Yeah.
The general concept was pioneered by the telephone companies' service maintenance contract instruments, which are only incidental to the service. Service industries have now grown to include automobiles, typewriters, calculating machines, and many other tools. There are myriad. Is that right? There are myriad of other industrial rental services. Despite the uses of the term ownership, only a minor fraction of home and car owners actually own these items free of encumbrances.
Yeah.
The quasi owners of yesterday and today make payments on mortgages of great length, in which the underwriting fund are provided by banks, labor funds, insurance companies.
Yeah.
All of the underwritten in one way or another by federal governments.
Let's pause right there because that was a big long sentence.
It is, and it's important to.
Yeah, because he said, okay, somehow we bought into this, that I own my house, even though it's worth $400,000 and it has a $300,000 mortgage on it. And I believe I own my house. He's kind of revealing that fallacy.
Well, that's what Robert Kiyosaki said.
Yeah, this idea. What's that?
Your house is not an asset. Didn't he used to say that?
Well, the idea is
No,
that
it say your house belong to the bank.
Right.
Doesn't belong to you.
Right.
You're the owner of a house.
That
Yes.
it's not an asset.
Yeah.
It's the bank's asset. So
And
the
to
fact
see
that
who
you-
is that, you have to test that, you have to look at the prime occupancy of the so-called owner, and prime occupancy to the benefit of who? When your prime occupancy is to do your utmost to pay back the loan in order to buy back your mortgage, isn't it?
right.
It's kind of a
You
time.
issued a bond on the house, and the bank bought the bond. In exchange, extended you a line of credit in the
Right.
form of mortgage. And you are working, you are exchanging whatever that you have to redeem that mortgage, to get free of the bondage of mortgage to death. That's what mortgage means. You are tied to death. So who is the owner during that time that the mortgage is at play? Who is the owner of the asset?
The bank.
That's it.
Well, it's shared ownership, actually. If I have a $400,000 house with $300,000 mortgage, I own $100,000 equity in the house, and the bank owns the other $300,000 equity in the house. My point was the bank.
Nah. Okay,
What?
good.
The hierarchy to that, Steve,
That
if you default,
yeah, if you default,
you
then
lose
it's
the house.
theirs. It's theirs.
Well, I know. In a sense, I'm renting. While I technically own that 100 grand, and I could sell it to somebody else and make $100,000 on that, take $100,000 away. I maintain that equity by paying on that bond or that mortgage that Mana is talking about. So it's
Yeah,
kind of
but Steve, you are paying on it, but your equity is a secondary claim to that of a bank.
well,
You
yeah.
agree with me?
And as
The
long as
master claim is a mortgage, even if it's 10%, because if you default on, let's just say the loan to value is 10% only.
right,
If you default for any other reason on the 10%, right?
yeah,
Your house still goes.
yeah.
There's no argument that, oh, it was only 10%, my equity was 90%.
Yeah. I want to say something about this. I believe this is a typo here. This should be car, as you read it, Joe. After a half a century of owning and operating 55 successive automobiles, I'm now switching to rental car.
Yes.
And this is prophetic. The general concept was pioneered by telephone companies. They gave you a telephone, but then you subscribe to a monthly service. Man, everything we're doing like that. My telephone right here, this is $1,000 telephone, and I got it because I subscribed to a company and signed a 2-year contract. So they have my subscription to rent their services for 2 years, and they gave me a telephone. Well, they actually didn't. I had to actually pay an extra $1,000 over that. I could have gotten a free phone, but it wouldn't do anything. This one stands on its head sideways, so I paid $1,000 for it. The general concept was pioneered by telephone companies. Service maintained contact instruments, which are only incidental to service. They gave us our telephones. Science industries have now grown to include automobiles, typewriters, calculating machines, and many other tools. Do you know what? I saw an electric car manufacturer. It's cheaper than Tesla. Why? Because they don't sell you the batteries in the car. You get an electric car without the batteries. The batteries are stored in the bottom of the car, and you subscribe to the battery. So when the battery runs down, you don't plug it in at your house and give it juice. You drive into a service station, and a robot drops out the old battery and switches batteries with you. So you never have battery failure. They take all the bad batteries out of the line, and all you have to do is drive in, not to a gas station, but to a battery station, and they load your battery up underneath it. So you pay less for the car because you're not buying the batteries. You pay a monthly subscription in addition to your car for that service, And then the battery company can upgrade those batteries and switch them out for you. I can show you a video on how you drive your car and the battery gets changed out. So this
Okay, but let me be the devil's advocate here again, Steve.
Sure. Yeah.
On the whole paragraph that you, I mean, let's just call it a block. The block that you highlighted. What is to you the key word there in relationship to what you say?
The key word is that he stopped owning a car. He started doing rental cars because ownership is some kind of myth and it's not efficient. I think that's the point he's making.
Okay, to me, the key word is incidental.
Okay.
You see where incidental is?
Yeah, I do see the word incidental.
Yes. He said, by telephone company service maintain contract instrument, which are only incidental to the service, meaning that minimum to the service.
Right.
Meaning that the cost that you pay for that service, to rent that service, is really small, very small.
Yes.
Now, look at what is happening today. The world has been digitized, right? And you are in there an individual, and you are the renter of all of those digitized services. Why are we drowning in debt? Because the cost of rental is no more incidental. And when you amalgamate it to the myriad of services that we rent, it is a big chunk of whatever that we have that allow us to pay for our living. In other words, our income. So by living in this environment, I'm swamped in debt because of the asymmetry. It wasn't something that was a duality before. I didn't understand what it is. How much of an income or in Malaysia, how much of their income, of the income of the poor, how does it compare to what they pay for renting, having a mobile service or accessing the internet? Is it small? So we end up into having people that have to go to loan sharks in order just to live for one day, because they didn't understand what is at play. And that has to do with the capture of the value created. What underpins the whole of this is that it's supposed to bring down ephemeralization, is supposed to bring down the cost of usage.
Yeah. Here's something interesting.
That's a very good point. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm moving on to another point. So reaffirm it for Mano. Go ahead, Joe.
No. It's an excellent point. And I won't rehash it, but I had just read a business case that actually substantiates everything that Manu just said.
Right.
With essentially Uber and Lyft.
Yeah. What about it? What's the punchline?
Punchline is why subscription services would not work in that industry, and kind of relates to what Manu was just saying, the incidental to the service. It was the same idea. That it's a long story, so I'm not going to go into it, but
yeah, it's a good point. Here's an interesting fact. Underwriting funds are provided by banks, labor funds, and insurance companies. So where this is like labor funds now are hedge funds. You know, it used to be labor unions had retirement funds. They were a big mover. Now it's hedge funds because all the hedge funds gutted the labor funds. Retirement funds got gutted and they got privatized. But back in Bucky's day, those were institutional things that retirement funds were granted by companies. And notice this: banks, labor funds, and insurance companies. Insurance companies insure the bank. So if a bank loses a loan, the insurance company pays for it. And here's the punchline: all are underwritten in one way or other by federal governments. What just happened? How many times has the federal government bailed out Wall Street?
AIG.
Yeah.
Mm.
And AIG is the insurance company that insured insurance companies. Most people don't know what AIG is.
No.
AIG is the insurance company that insured insurance companies. So by bailing out AIG, the US government bailed out every insurance company because the insurance companies were going under. Wall Street was doing that. They were issuing high risk funds and they were betting that they were going to go in default. So they would profit when the insurance companies came in to pay them off. It was just a double racket. And here he is in 1966, 69, predicting all are underwritten other way by federal governments. And so he's anticipating that human beings are going to make sense out of this and pull our heads out of the sand and make different decisions. We haven't made it.
Mm.
And I think we left off there, Joe. So I'll
But
continue.
take it there. Let's look at the practicality of this thing, Steve.
Yeah.
You know, there were four. The quasi, you say the quasi owner. Everybody is a quasi owner, right?
Yeah. Everybody
In
that
this
has a
Utopia.
mortgage, everybody that has a
Yes.
mortgage is a quasi owner. Yeah.
Okay. No, in this Utopia, everybody is a quasi owner. And then he has his four: banks, labor funds, insurance co, and the federal government.
Yeah.
The police. But now the question is this one. All of this has to be bound by a contract, agreements, and those agreements has to be adhered to. The closest place that they tried this with a better result than the US was in Germany, where on the board of companies, you have representative of employees, as well as, I don't know, of insurance companies or the federal government of Germany. But that allows you basically here, what he's saying is that if you have this, you start now putting together some unit of energy over which we are all accountable and that we use it. So this is an anti-entropic way of putting together things that benefit the largest possible. Does it make sense? Because if in this four, let's just say I'm the bank and I'm the owner of it and that's it. So you guys are not quasi owners. I'm the owner. Well, what will that entail? I will have to enforce things on you and you are rebel against me.
Right.
And it will create the world that we have today, where things are lopsided. There is no balance, there's no check, and there are abuses all over. So the whole of that always have the counter, not the counter of it, the dual of it is the rules, regulation, contract that we all buy into and we play our role for that to happen. And you were talking about in 2008, the federal government, you know, too big to fail.
That's right.
Yeah. And still you do too big to fail, you bail out, but there's still the thing that, you know, is business as usual.
That's right.
You're still sucking in, taking deposit or orders, or just printing to give to guy to just take risks unnecessarily. All right.
Okay. Shall we continue reading? Hey, you know what,
Yes.
Joe? I was thinking about those modular homes that that expand. Like if you want to be in the bedroom, a wall moves and you have more bedroom. And then if you want to be in a living room, the wall moves and it has more. Talk about amplitude modulation. That would be a really good example. You sent that to me?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's some of the
Oh.
most innovative things that have actually gone on with in home ownership
Yeah, I have.
overall is,
Joe
is-
sent to everybody.
yeah,
I think I have that too.
yeah, you definitely have it.
Yeah.
I found the video really quickly. It's called Robotic. Watch this: robotic furniture transform a room.
Yeah, I think that I mean, that's the one innovation that has really happened. It's maybe not with the homes itself, but perhaps the space within it. That's
Yeah.
where I think that's where the innovation, and I have to read more about it to see if that's going to be something that really does catch on.
Yeah.
But I do think that there's something interesting there.
Here's one of the videos you sent me. I've got the audio turned off. Maybe I'll turn it on.
With your voice, you can turn your bedroom into a living room, or you can turn your living room into
an office. Whether it's lifting things into the ceiling, moving walls around, at the end of the day, it's all about making spaces feel much bigger than they actually are.
So did you guys see that?
Finger
Walk into a
touch,
room,
with your
you push a
phone, with
button.
your voice, you can turn your bedroom into a living room, or you can turn your living room into an office. Whether it's lifting things into the ceiling, moving walls around, at the end of the day, it's all about making spaces feel much bigger than they actually are.
Okay, here comes some more.
This whole idea of robotic architecture, you know,
So here's the
combining two
living room.
disciplines to really make spaces and architecture much smarter. And that's how we create Ori.
The living room gets small.
So right now we have
Sorry.
two big families of products, what we call the Pocket family and then what we call the Cloud family. The Pocket family is the products that move kind of horizontally. And what they do is they basically create rooms on demand. So think about a room that disappears, and then when you need a closet, whoop, expands, gives you the closet. When you need an office, expands, gives you an office. On the other side, we have the Cloud family. As you can imagine, these are systems that drop from the ceiling, and those are products like the Cloud Bed. This is not Imagineering anymore or science fiction. This is really technologies that we are installing across the country with hundreds of people living with them. It's just a lot of fun to be working every day on trying to solve a problem and a challenge you're really passionate about. So I really fell in love with the problem of rethinking real estate to make it more sustainable and more affordable. And that took me into this adventure of research and my program at MIT of really trying to find the technologies and the solutions that could solve that challenge.
Kind of interesting,
You
eh?
see, yeah, fascinating. You see here again, it fixes to me. It may help a little bit in terms of determining what is amplitude modulation and frequency modulation. In amplitude modulation, that flat will still be a flat. You just expanded or contracted.
Yeah.
You're going to say a 2-bedroom flat.
Mm.
That's the way we function in real estate traditionally. You say a single house. You
Yeah.
say that is it. So those categories are still those categories. They can be expanded in size or contracted in size, but that is it. It's amplitude modulation.
Yeah.
But here, you see, he talk about the cloud using resources of storage. You remember that?
Yeah.
He talk about time of use when needed. You need to have those capabilities. This is frequency modulation of that space, definitely, in my mind.
Well, I really do see it as amplitude. Right now, most people have a 3-bedroom house and they're either in the living room or in the bedroom. If I'm in the bedroom, I don't need the living room. So why don't that whole house was 800 square feet, and it could be mostly an office by moving a wall, or it could take a bedroom and move it and make it smaller to make a cupboard bigger. You know, I see both a frequency modulation, but I see amplitude in terms of space. like that
Mm.
bed goes all the way up into the ceiling and becomes and then there are lights underneath the bed that become the ceiling lights, the can lights in the living room. Well, when I'm
Yeah,
sleeping,
but-
I need a living room, you know?
Steve, think about this. Frequency modulated environmental occupancies. It's not amplitude.
Well, frequency
Yeah.
modulation is timeshare.
Yes,
Frequency
but here. No, I'm talking about what Bucky says. Frequency modulated environmental or environment occupancies. The environment here, in this case, in Joe's case, was the space that was between four walls.
It's frequency.
You know, I'm just reading what he
frequency is
said.
amplitude.
Yes, I'm trying to apply that here. The
Yeah.
environment is that those four walls, that's the space. that you
Yeah,
have.
I see what you're saying.
Okay, and then he say frequency modulated environment occupancies. What are the different occupancies that you have on that same space?
Yes.
See, I see it differently. I see him talking about cars. Why do I own a car when I can be in a community and share my car? That car is going to be used more frequently if I share it with other people. My car is parked right out here right now. It's going to be parked out here maybe until tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Somebody could be using it.
Well, wait a minute. So does frequency modulation require multiple users?
It requires more users in the same amount of time.
Because the way I look at it is frequency modulation may not require more users. It could require just more different uses of space.
Well, yeah.
I
think
mean,
it's
in
debatable
that,
because it's ontological. It could be either way. I see the room moving as amplitude modulation. It's not frequency. You don't have people sleeping.
the
that
room is
bad.
the frequency in that case, as opposed to,
The room is the space.
Steve,
The modulation.
Steve,
is
let's take it this way. In amplitude modulation, a house is for family to live. That's all it is. It's amplitude. A house is for a family to live.
Okay.
Okay. Here, the occupancies were very different. It was an office.
Yeah. See, to me,
It was a house to sleep.
Yeah.
It was an entertainment area.
Yeah.
It was a gym,
Yeah.
which you cannot do. It is the occupancy.
No,
The
see, to
occupancy,
me,
that is the issue.
let's say I have a house with a living room and a bedroom and a kitchen. What the best is to have three families do it. One person's eating and in the kitchen while another person's sleeping while the other person's in the living room having a party. And then they rotate. That to me would be frequency modulation. Amplitude modulation is where you actually change the dimensions of the thing.
Exact. I agree with you.
Well, and I think that it's
No, I'm
ontological.
just like, yes.
I think it's ontological. It's not about being right about this point of view or that point of view. It's about taking the metaphor and applying it any way we can to increase efficiencies.
Yes, that's what Becky says.
Yeah.
But he says the concept of man on earth, why we're here, if we want to create utopia, is to be spoken about as frequency modulated environment occupancies.
Okay, let's continue to read this paragraph. The fact is the
Fact is-
telephone in the home. What's that?
I was going to read it. That's all.
Well, that's okay. I thought we were going to split the big paragraphs, but you can read it, please.
The fact is the telephone in the home, though clearly rented, is as clean and new as if purchased and owned. It is swiftly replaced by superior sets because it is owned by the telephone companies whose use frequency pays dividends, and use frequency is predicated on the relative efficiency and its induced desirability of the constant improvement of the machines.
Okay.
Everybody clear on that?
I think so. Any comments or questions?
Well, I just like the fact that the telephone in the home, though clearly rented is as clean as new. Meaning that the quality of service has to be there all the time.
Right. Whether it's
That's
owned,
a quid pro quo.
yeah,
Always.
whether it's owned or rented. I want to come back to this amplitude modulation and the frequency modulation in terms of size, because in the example, one of the reasons why they got rid of AM radio is because you can only put so many bands in the space because all these amplitudes bump into each other. So they were frequency modulation. You could put 20 radio stations in one market because they clipped off the top. The signal was not based on how wide that signal went up, not on the amplitude, but it was based on the number of times it wiggled on its delivery. So, you know, they were using amplitude modulation for things that required more data, like video. Television is over amplitude modulation. Radio is, but it's not as good a quality. You can put more FM channels in because it's frequency modulated, because it doesn't require the space. So keeping that in mind, I think it's an ontological discussion that can go in a lot of ways. And the very fact we're having this discussion is very powerful.
What is the metaphor that makes you elementary one, Steve, think
What's that?
about?
What?
That metaphor that you have there, what does it make you think, really? To me, it makes me think of the parallel and the serial. If you have to say, this is the highway, and I have only to pass, the order is Susan, Joe, Steve, and me. Well,
Don't forget
if Susan
Ben.
had a problem, everybody will have to wait. But if there are bypasses, shunting, that's what you talk about. You remember that one of the words that Bucky talked about before, shunting the flow of energy to achieve
Yes.
efficiency.
Yeah.
So if I come and there's a bottleneck and there are 5 bypasses, well, there are choices. If Susan, if Anne comes here and she's stuck, when Joe comes, he has these 4 choices to take. He take one. And if we are delivering a message to some destination, it's going to be far more efficient and less costly than having to wait for Anne to find a way to pass first. So to me, it boils down to that, to those words that you use, shunting energy for purposes, is with frequency modulation. It is like the stacking of many, many ways in parallel for information to circulate and to be delivered, instead of just having to go in one flow. One flow is the AM. Several flows, and Joe and Steve, you say it in how you were explaining how frequency modulated is applied, is to be able to have all of those through the bandwidth in a way that is much more versatile and much more precise and agreeable and effective than when you are using AM. I remember the AM band where you remember that time when you have to turn the knob in order to tune in. You remember that?
Well, you have to turn
Or
it on
radios.
even for frequency modulation. It depends on the kind of tuner that you have.
Yeah.
So you can do both ways with both. Again, it's an ontological discussion, and so it can be applied in many ways. It's like we're arguing, well, what is a mountain? And to me, a mountain is this big, and to you, a mountain is that big. And the question is, what is a mountain? And I did some research on this, and it said that in 1910, the UK decided there was no legal definition for a mountain, and they disregarded it. The US for a while kept it and said a mountain is anything over 1,000 feet off of sea level. But it got so complicated now, the official definition of mountain is it's harder to climb than a hill. That's the official definition. And so, you know, the fact that we're thinking about this and doing what we can to apply it is really the powerful thing.
But I think the powerful idea is the idea of effectiveness
Yeah.
and efficiencies. That's what Bucky is talking about. Is that the history of man on earth, the concept of man on earth is that of effectiveness, is that of using ephemeralization
Right.
to achieving bigger with lesser.
Well, that's our next goal here. That's the next thing. So let's do that. Joe, you want to read this top part?
Sure. Concept 10, ephemeralization and invisible commonwealth. The progressive doing of more with less per each and every reinvested resource unit of energy, M, matter, energy, R, radiation, and I, intellect. Wealth is intellect harnessed in inanimate energy, tooled anticipatorily to automatically produce the forward metabolic regeneration of humanity.
I think that's really cool. I'm putting that definition in the chat, and I think I'll stick it in this little guy right here too. Well, that needs to go down out of the way. You can't see it. What just happened to it? There we go. Frequency modulation. So I'm going to put that over there. Wealth is intellect harnessed in animate energy, tooled anticipatorily to automatically produce the forward metabolic regeneration of humanity. Wow.
That's Utopia.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about ephemeralization and invisible commonwealth. So let's continue. Go ahead, Joe, if you want.
A ship of the sea had first of all to float and stay on top of the water. A floating ship could and still can carry vastly larger and heavier cargoes that can be carried by men on their backs or on the backs of animals. Through shipping competition, there developed swift evolution in ways of doing ever more important tasks with ever less material effort and time. This doing more with less came into high magnitude of effectiveness in the development of steel steamships. Doing of ever more with ever less, I identified in 1927 as ephemeralization. It is the major control objective of design science in respect to development of aeroplane evolution.
I think that's really powerful. Any comments or questions on that so far? I think that provides a really powerful insight or definition as to what design science really is.
Should be, anyway.
Yeah. It is a major objective of design science. So one could say the major objective of design science in respect to development.
That's ideally.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think there's a lot of design that comes into the fact that people just design things for them to regenerate, revenue for themselves. I mean, even when I worked in consulting, sometimes we wrote a statement of work with the idea that, we weren't solving the problem. We were just entrenching ourselves into the client. So we were designing our own work essentially.
Yeah.
So you're forced to use us in other circumstances.
I think you hit on something absolutely amazing there. Most services today are designed to create a subscription base to addict the customer in order to avoid having to go sell something to somebody else. Right.
Or to somehow get you to consume something that you don't need, or to just basically it's self-serving design. It's not necessarily design
efficiency.
Exactly, around efficiency.
Yeah, very astute.
So that's where most design is today.
Right.
As a total consequence of ephemeralization, paramount importance to the world's military efforts on the sea, in the air, and in space, men are constantly doing so much more with so much less that within the last century we have witnessed the growth from less than 1% to a benefica- uh, benefication or benefaction
Yeah.
of faction of 44% of humanity, with a higher standard of living than had been realized in any previous century by any monarch. Interesting, especially considering.
But well, this is quite important.
Yeah.
Is that many of the advances that we are benefiting from today were done in the military realm.
Yeah.
That is
ARPA and DARPA in the US, for example.
that
In
Yeah.
Russia or in China, many of those things. Unfortunately, that's where they come from. The internet comes from the military. The mobile phone comes from the military. And many of those things. And it reminds me that parallel to that ephemeralization, there's an obligation of education. Education not only of ourselves, but of any other human to understand, or to understand to the largest extent, what is at stake. The my corner of a ship understanding is still very prevalent today. I mean, we saw it at many places where, let's just say, life is in danger. And I don't know if it's panic, but probably in panic, in self-reflexes, you have the ugly heads of, let me call it racism and things like that coming up. And really keeping us away from really acting in a way that is of this commonwealth that we're talking about. So there is obligation, courage, both individual and collectively, to pursue the education of all humans, or to lead in a way that take care of all of those that has margin. You know, you talk about the 45% here, because that's where, you know, the application of feminization affected people. But yet, the 45% of people, I will bet that a lot of them were still ignorant of what was going on.
That's true.
And what were actually the challenges of the time.
Okay, should we continue to read?
Yeah.
The
It
accelerated.
is.
Go
Sorry.
ahead.
I was just going to say, no, it's interesting that the military did provide this innovation. I wonder if it can be done without the military, just out of curiosity. But anyway.
Yeah, I hear you.
But it was done with the
Oh,
military.
no, I'm not denying.
Just for one reason, Joe, is that, for example, when they talk about bank, labor fund, insurance, and federal government, the military is the realm where that is applied effectively. Everybody in the military knows why they are there. They are trained in a certain way. There is a certain discipline that goes, and then there is a liberality of putting resources into kind of harnessing the result teleologically.
Yeah, but the US spends more on their military budget than 9 of the other next countries combined.
But there's also the result. I mean, the internet, the cell phone, where was it? Where did it come from?
And my point was that the very all the people employed in the military are very disciplined, and everybody knows their niche and their job, whether they like it or not.
Right.
It operates fairly efficiently, but
Uh,
we just, well, I know that's arguable. But the point is, compared to how we fund it is completely inefficient. We can't account for, the US just spent, I think we sent $800 million in military equipment to Ukraine, and we cannot tell you where it went.
no,
Yes.
there's no accountability.
No
And in the
accountability.
federal government, you could, specifically the Defense Department, it
Yeah.
works like no other department. And Department of Interior is an interesting place too. But I mean, but the Department of Defense is like, it's mind-boggling how much money they waste.
I think we spent $800 billion on the F-35, and the F-18 will outrun it. It's more dependable than the F-35. That's what I've
Is it
heard.
really?
That's
Oh,
what I've heard.
I
I
didn't
saw a
know that.
video. I saw a video on it. We still can't make it work right. But so that's why I don't know. So
But let's put it in a context. Was that illogical?
yeah, I don't know. I think they were trying
Because
to,
what he's talking about here is, for example, during the wars. You know, the big, I mean, for example, if you take the 60s in the US, it was in the psyche of the US a matter of survival, right? The race between America and the Soviet Union, and vice versa.
Right.
into space.
That is a different context from something else.
Yeah.
But in that context, things can be done a lot effectively. I'm not condoning
Right.
conflict
I know.
or war, but
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
I get what you're saying.
when it comes to survival, if you are convinced that you have to survive, it puts you into a different mind frame.
Yeah. Are we ready to read?
Sure.
All right. The accelerating acceleration of doing more with less will, within the next 24 years, bring an even higher standard of living to the remaining 59% of humanity, while gaining the same higher standard for the already advantaged 41%. All
That's
to
the
be
problem.
realized-
Why did he not?
That's right. All to be realized out of the Earth's physical resources, which are continually decreasing per each world human.
Yeah.
Okay, Joe, you want to read that next paragraph?
Yeah. Is that true though?
Well,
It didn't happen. It did not happen.
Yeah.
well, it
On the
did
contrary,
happen.
it was skewed. It was skewed even in the so-called developed countries. It was skewed again.
Yeah.
A lot of people got sucked by poverty
Yeah,
from.
yeah. Well, then we have COVID, we have bank crashes, exploitation by Russia and China and the US. Bah. We ready to read the next paragraph?
Sounds
But
like
still,
Billy Joel song.
What
We didn't
have
start
been
the fire?
what have been the result from the 60s, 70s of all of these crises? How has it impacted? Let me put the average, even American, the number one power in the world. Has the average American become richer or poorer?
Since
On average?
1970,
On average,
poorer.
Yes,
poor.
exactly.
Yeah.
So you see type 1 and type 2 evolution here.
I was reading.
It's
about
gone
that.
all type 1.
Yeah. But there's a principle called Pareto principle. I don't know if you've heard about it. The common sense
80-20.
the common sense manifestation of the Pareto principle is the 80-20 rule. It
Mhm.
takes 20% effort to get 80% results.
Mhm.
Or how many people do you have working for you? About half. How many teachers do their job? There's about 20% of them that do their job and really do it well, and the other 80% just kind of hang in there, right?
That's
It's
right.
the Pareto principle. And if you take that standard bigger, it works like compounding it. It has an amazing effect. It's why gardens grow and the plants in the middle grow stronger than the plants on the outside. The closer I am to the center of things, the more opportunity I'm going to get. And the more I'm on the fringe of things, the less opportunity I'm going to get. And that is a true principle in any community. And it's a Pareto principle. And the human brain has not coped with it yet. And I think it comes back to the understanding of what is the commons and what is commonwealth.
That is the key.
Yeah.
That is the key.
Yeah.
I was going to say your key word there, what you say, Steve, was community. What is community? Yeah. Are we Earthians or are we American or are we, how do you call people from Utah? How do you call Utahns?
Yeah, Utahns. Utah.
Yeah.
Utahn. Utah.
Yes. Are you Utah? Who are we?
Yeah.
Kelly brought Hubin. You understand what it is? All of this always goes with some commons. What are the commons?
Yeah.
What binds us together?
Yeah. And you know, the eastern states like Virginia, it's all about the Commonwealth of Virginia. Boston had the commons. And when the settlers came over here from England, they brought the idea of commonwealth and the commons. But as the US expanded, it was all about individual, you know, putting a stake in the ground and killing a Native American if they had to do it to build their house in the prairie. You know, it's crazy what went on. This divine right of kings transitioned in to the manifest destiny. You know, move west, young man, move west, right? The idea that the United States, 13 colonies were divinely inspired to go all the way west.
Mm-hmm.
Total crazy. It was left over from the divine right of kings. And it's really crazy to look at that. Are we ready to read again?
Sure.
Yep.
Is it my turn or yours, Joe? I've forgotten.
I'll go. I can go ahead.
All right.
Ephemeralization, the comprehensive effect of more with lessing, is scientifically identifiable with anti-entropy. Ephemeralization, a product of the metaphysical conservation being more effective and coherent than physical entropy, is the number one economic surprise of world man. Up to 10 years ago, all world economists counseled the world political leaders that there never had been and never would be enough vital sustenance to support more than a very few. This is Malthus's hypothesis.
What's
So the
it? What
development,
hypothesis?
Malthus, the economist.
Yeah, Malthusian.
Yeah, Malthusian.
Malthusian. Okay.
Even
Malthusian
Adam Smith.
economist. I'm sorry.
Even
What?
Adam Smith. That is their hypothesis. Even Adam Smith.
Yeah,
Adam Smith. Yeah.
No, even him.
I was actually just about to send something to you guys about about Adam Smith. I was just reading something.
But I like, just comment, ephemeralization, the comprehensive effect of more with lessing is scientifically identifiable with anti-entropy.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful
Whoa.
too. I agree with that. That is really powerful.
Just copy it and put in the chat, see? Yeah.
Okay, I'll put it in the chat. I've also just putting it in my little collection board here. Maybe I'll put it in the maybe I'll
You should
it
put that in the email.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna do. Because I
It's
think
really big.
these are profound. The idea of what is anti-entropy. I mean, we have some basic understanding, but ephemeralization is identifiable scientifically with anti-entropy. It's not anti-entropy, but it's identifiable with it and probably are synonymous. Okay, good. I'll read this. The development of ephemeral.
Okay.
Is that all right? We ready?
Go ahead. Yeah.
The development of ephemeralization has been conducted by design scientists and technologists whose numbers have amounted to a small fraction of 1% of humanity. This needs to be our last paragraph. And their work has been focused almost exclusively upon the weaponry and defense systems. Political man dealing with the great majority of humanity were utterly surprised 10 years ago to discover that their destructive weapons system had inadvertently developed a constructive byproduct. This occurred when the prime and secondary weaponry contractors were displayed weapons contractors turned to the domestic market for outlets for their high performance per pound and per unit of time capabilities. So much ephemeralization drifted into domestic economy between 1900 and 1966 as to have converted 44% of humanity from have-nots to haves.
Wow.
Wow.
Type 1, type 2 again. Type 1, inadvertently. You know, you're developing your theological objective when you are at war is you're developing all of these technologies for war purposes.
Right on.
But inadvertently, there is a byproduct. People identify with their intellect that, hey, these things that exist here can actually be applied here.
Right on.
For a different effect in terms of the well-being of a population in time of peace.
Cool. I think it's time to go. We've got a few minutes before Joe in New York falls into it. Well, it's already tomorrow for Joe. Good.
Yeah.
Joe, how you feeling and what's your takeaway today?
I'm feeling pretty good, and I think that this is one of the more interesting parts of Utopian and Oblivion is ephemeralization. I think that it really kind of calls attention to what it really means to do more with less, and whether actually we're achieving it, and how it has been achieved in certain circumstances too. I think when we think of Utopian and Oblivion, that doing more with less is going to be the main idea for me, that if you're going to create a utopia, I think that ultimately you have to do more with less, but you have to do more with less that doesn't necessarily consolidate ownership and power into the hands of a few. I think that that's kind of critical, and that's part of the design that we're talking about here. I also thought it was really interesting that how we went through AM and FM with the uses of apartment space. I thought that walking through that example actually gave me a better idea as to what AM and FM actually meant, because I was actually sold that it was FM prior to our discussion, and then I understood how it is AM, how it was. Yeah, I mean, it became a little bit more clear to me when Steve's your example. I'll have to go back and actually when they were moving the bed up into essentially moving the bed up into the ceiling, how that is how that is what is it?
Amplitude modulated.
And amplitude modulated versus frequency modulated. I thought that was a very good example for me. And so, yeah, I great call. I thank you everybody for joining. Miss Susan, but I'm sure she'll be back next week. And Anne, my very good friend Anne, who will miss next week.
Yes.
But thank you for gracing us with your smile and your comments tonight. How do you feel? What are you taking away?
Thank you very much, Joe. Actually, I spent a lot of time listening to all three of you, because there was some point it went into a space where I think the three of you had more to share, right? So I was spending a lot of time listening. So thank you very much. Yeah. So I was hoping to get to the last two paragraphs. So I'm not going to end today when we say goodbye to everybody. I'm going to read the last two paragraphs because I've been fascinated by ephemeralization. Since Joe, you always bring up ephemeralization. So it was only at one point, I can't recall which month it was, when you started talking about it, and you linked it for me with this doing more with less and doing everything with nothing, right? Because I like that, but then I didn't tie it in with ephemeralization. So when you did it, it was like, wow, that is very, very powerful. So I'm working on tasking my entire team on how to do it with education, right? Because education is one of the worst, because it's as we go on, it's about doing less with a lot. Okay,
right.
producing less with a lot, right? So that's the direction we're going with this. But for today, I want to see the last two paragraphs, because how it links to the rest of what we discussed today. And then this Manu, what you talked about having, talking about replacing this ownership with rental of new equipment, and you said that we have to replace this with commonwealth. In fact, the appreciation of what commonwealth means, because I'm Malaysian, and Malaysian is part of the British Commonwealth. So we've always thought of it as, as being part of England's history, right? But now there's a whole new appreciation for me on the idea of Commonwealth. So wealth has to be for everybody, right? And I believe very strongly, yes, it can be common and not in the purview of a few. So thank you for that one. And for Steve, today, your knowledge of real estate, because when we're talking about, a lot of it was brought up by Bucky, and thank you for sharing the how it shows up out there in the real estate world, because I think we all own a house, and it's a house, right? And suddenly I realized that I might have more space than I actually need. A whole lot more space.
Maybe you can do more with less, right? Ephemeralization. Wow.
Yes. Or with the space we have, what else we can do with it,
There you go. Frequency. And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so thank you very much. And so Manu, over to you. How do you feel, and what is your takeaway?
I'm really appreciative. And I think it was a powerful session today, to me, to the list. And I'm really thankful and appreciative of all the contributions, Steve, Joe, and it was really enjoyable. Some of the things that really marked me here is the concept of man on earth is to be spoken about as frequency modulated environmental occupancies. And then he's talking about ownership becoming an appurtenance, just one aspect of many, many other things. And then the idea of commonwealth and quasi-ownership also put on us, I think, the obligation of individual responsibility to ensure the collective one. We've got to be responsible, meaning that the first thing that we have to do is to really get educated. It's absolutely important. Like this session, we came out with a lot of things, including, like Joe said, a clearer understanding of AM and FM and the applications, including many, many other aspects that we didn't have when we came into this forum today. And then the definition of wealth, that is intellect harnessed in animate energy, tool anticipatorily to automatically produce them forward metabolic regeneration of humanity, the forward metabolic regeneration of humanity. That is teleology. And then ephemeralization of the comprehensive effect of more with lessing is scientifically identifiable with anti-entropy. Those are some of the very, very strong things that I take away this session.
Yeah, that
So
is.
thank you all. Thanks, Steve, for sharing your deep and wide understanding of the applicability of these concepts in the real estate realm. And then also in music, because I mean, we are all, you know, we all been kind of brainwashed by AM and
Yeah.
FM because we live into it. It started as like a gadget, like to say, our understanding of it is like to say iPhone or to say Frigidaire for fridge. I don't know if you remember, you know, it's only Steve that, and maybe Anne that can remember that we used to call the fridge Frigidaire because Frigidaire was American company
Right.
that produced the first fridges that were
Yeah.
used all over.
Before that, it was an ice box.
Okay,
It
yes,
was an ice box, and then it became a fridge.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
right. But Frigidaire was also a company, right? You remember that?
Yes.
It was,
yes,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It still is,
Yeah,
I think.
right. So I was saying that our understanding of AM and FM was that we just danced to the tune. We didn't understand what it actually technically and practically means. It just became like natural to us because we're in the flock.
Yeah.
But it becomes a disadvantage as you seek to understand what is behind and what is in the fineness and the wholeness of our environment into applying locally and widely to improve the lots of meanings. And I really thank you, Steve, for that. So on this, Steve, how do you feel? What do you take away?
Well, I got to say that I've been struggling with anti-entropic and, you know, started to get a grip on anti-entropic. And Bucky says that human existence is actually anti-entropic. Everything I do, I'm trying to hold on to my money. I'm trying to make that car last longer. I want to have this relationship longer. Everything's about slowing down the energy and having it not go away. And if I look at the Kabbalion and other mystical books on the origin of the universe, it's all about energy slowing down. And at each level, the human being gets to have a broader experience because things aren't moving so quickly. And that clicked in today. I'd never thought of all that being anti-entropic. The very purpose of the universe could be anti-entropic if I'm going to be homeocentric, right? Anthropic, the anthropic principle, right? The strong anthropic principle is that human beings can perceive the universe because we created it. And the weak anthropic principle is, well, whoever created it, it's a miracle we can actually see it. That's the principle, the anthropic principle. I learned that from Stephen Hawking in his book, Brief History of Time. But Manu, this conversation about AM and FM, it seems to me that it's so topological, it's so ontological, that to apply it this way, whether it's the size of the room or the frequency, it seems to me that the invitation is to get out of that box.
Right.
Somebody said, you know, we like you said, Manu, we have AM and FM. We grew up in that environment, right? And so we're used to seeing it used a certain way. And so I want to be right about this or be right about that. And the whole idea is to get out of that box and look at things from a different point of view completely. That's what I love about this call is we're willing to just have a discussion and be open to it. So that was, that's really good. I just like this. I like this idea of, okay, what is a mountain? And to find out that as I studied that, I mean, I did a bunch of Google searches and read a bunch of guys, a mountain became less and less definable. And it was just amazing to me. And yet if I think I know what a mountain is, but I really don't, You know, I just know what I'm used to, and I want to get out of that. So this conversation with you guys is so profoundly significant for me. I just love how you, Anna, are actually applying this in your business and with your training with your teachers and your students and the lives you're changing. I hope I can do that too. And I know that each of us are gaining this perspective and we're sharing it with people. So that's cool. So, and by the way, I posted the last 2 paragraphs in the chat. So if you will download the chat right now, there's 3 buttons on the right-hand side. If you'll click those 3 little buttons down at the bottom by the chat, you see that? It says save file. And so tonight, before you leave, you can read those last 2 verses, those last 2 paragraphs, and that way you won't have to worry about next week when you'll be gone. Were you able to
Do you have a copy of it, Anne, as well?
No, I think what you normally do is you put it into the email that you sent out. Yeah, I can.
I don't usually get that specific because this is just.
But
No,
let me tell you, let me share
file.
with you what I do.
Okay.
Before the end, like now, I've just saved it.
You
I
saved
click,
it.
I've highlighted with my mouse and I just save. So when we close, I'm just going to save. I have a Word file with notes of weekend and Wednesday call. So with the chat, I'll just paste it there and then save it. So it becomes like my journaling of the chat. And I find it very practical.
I want to be very clear that as you look at your chat down there in the bottom, you'll see 3 little dots over here. Those
Yes.
3 dots, if you click on that, it'll say save file.
Yes.
There's little dots. And that way it saves it as a text file. It's not as beautiful as Manu's Word document, but it's in a text file. And it's those 3 little dots right there
Yes.
that make a difference.
Yeah, I think mine, because I'm using a tablet. I don't think I have that many, but it's okay. I've taken.
Yeah, it's limited, maybe.
I'm using a tablet too, and I can do that, but it depends on what kind of tablet you're using. All right, everybody.
And I also just
Thank you
sent
very much.
And I just sent you a copy of the Utopia and Oblivion.
And I've been sending a copy of the book. And
I have it.
Okay.
Thank
good.
you. I have that. I was actually referring to on my phone just now as we were going along.
Manu,
Okay.
in the chat, Manu has resolved the issue about what a mountain is. He says, a mountain is a mountain. It's just there. See?
It's
got different.
and that's the reason you climb it.
That's exactly right. Oh, very cool. Okay, we'll see you the next time around.
Cool.
Yes, take care.
You have a
Take
good
care.
night.
Hey,
It's
I
good
will.
morning for me here.
Oh, I'm
and
gonna have a
it's,
good night because I saw you.
And it's the afternoon. And Steve is still yesterday. So
That's right.
cool.
All righty. See you guys.
Take
Bye.
care.
Bye-bye.